Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Week 4 lecture. This is Professional Presentation, and again, I'm delighted to be with you again for another week. This week, we are going to be continuing our conversation on preparing for that interview. And as you recall from our previous week, we started talking about some key pointers, right? Started talking about how to prepare for that interview, the pre-interview, the during interview, and the post-interview process, and hopefully provided some intuitive and helpful tips for you to better prepare for the interview. This week we continue talking about that and providing additional tips and additional strategies as we work towards that mock interview, which is coming up very soon. I understand that most of you, if not all of you, have contacted Ms. Laura Acosta, and she's going to be wonderful, and it'll be a great experience doing that mock interview with her. I think you will learn a lot about yourselves and about this process, and will be better for it in the end. So don't stress about this. Don't stress about the mock interview. It's only going to be beneficial, and it can actually be very fun and self-rewarding. Okay, so this week, as I said, we're going to be discussing continuing our discussion, on the interview process. And the first part of today's lecture will focus on logistics, okay? After we talk about logistics, we will turn the page and talk about content, provide a strategy to help you approach the interview. And that strategy, and I'm sure some of you or most of you have used it or heard about it at one point, is called a SWOT analysis, right? And so we're going to be using the SWOT analysis, the SWOT, right? SWOT, SWOT, and thinking about a SWOT analysis from a personal perspective. So we're going to be thinking about a personal SWOT analysis to help you prepare for that interview. But before we get there, let's talk about some important logistical points that will help us prepare and look our best for that interview. So the first thing is we have to look the part. There's a saying that says that even if you don't know what you're doing, you have to look like you know what you're doing, right? And so looking the part is half the battle, right? So by looking the part, think about your presentation, obviously, clothing, right? Your posture. So for example, let me click out of here for a minute. I'll give you an example. If you're slouched like this, right? If you're slouching like this, it's going to come across to the interviewer that you are maybe a little scared, a little hesitant, right? So try and sit up on your chair as much as you can. Open your body up, yourself up to the interviewer. This shows that you are genuinely interested and engaged in the interview. Here's another tip that I learned from my colleague, Dr. James Curtis. And looking the part requires sometimes a little creativity. And for the gentleman, for example, you want to wear a tie for business interviews that require business attire. A coat and tie is appropriate. For interviews that are for positions, perhaps in law enforcement or in the construction sector or other areas where it is not expected or customary to wear a coat and tie, I would ask somebody that you maybe perhaps a friend or somebody that is a little bit better acquainted with that industry or that company, and perhaps ask what would be appropriate. But if you don't have the opportunity to ask, then it's better to be safe than sorry. Perhaps a sport coat would be okay, or just a shirt with a tie. But try and think about, if you're not sure, dress up one notch. Okay, that would be my recommendation. Okay, but if you do wear a suit or a coat, a sport coat like the one I'm wearing today, here's a tip, right? Sometimes when you're sitting in the interview, and this happens, especially important for online or virtual interviews. You see how these creases form in the back of our jackets, because as we sit down, the sitting down pushes up the jacket, and so it shows up on the screen, and it doesn't look as sharp as you want to look. So here's one strategy that I learned from my colleague, and that is to, before the interview begins, obviously, you pull down your coat as hard as you can, and then you sit on it. You sit on the coat, okay? And you see now that the creases have almost disappeared. For me, there's still a little bit of a crease here, and that's because my coat is not as long as I would like it to be. But you see, okay, it's better now. All right, so that's one little strategy as far as helping you look better, looking sharper, looking more presentable. You see now that they're a little better. Of course, it goes without saying that you want to be presentable, hair and as best as you can. But also, I would recommend perhaps using a little bit of powder before the interview, just to remove some of the glare that you might have reflecting on your face. Okay, so this is all having to do with looking the part, looking presentable. Also, you want to make sure that the background and the lighting are appropriate, right? So you see that the lighting this is my office. The lighting in my office is pretty appropriate. But if I turned off, and you don't see it here in the screen, if I turned off a lamp that I have on my desk, the lighting would not be as good, right? It would be a little darker, because I would only have the center light in my office. So as a tip for you, if you have a lamp, if you don't see it here, but if you have a lamp, it could be a tall lamp or it could be a small lamp, but I would try setting it on your desk and removing the lampshade, and then turn that on, and you will see that it will provide a pretty nice even light and glow to the room, and where it won't look like the light is directly reflecting off of your face or off of yourself. Okay, so that's a tip as far as the background and the lighting. On the background, try, of course, and remove any clutter, anything that does not look right. For example, here I'm teaching from my office. I'm lecturing from my office. So here, let me see if I can. Sorry, if I can show you. There we go. So here I have my office, and it would be preferable, if you were doing an interview, to perhaps remove some things in the back that are not necessary. But it would be okay to have a plant to add a little bit of color and a little bit of life to the room. Notice I have my Nicaraguan and my American flag in the back. There's a reason for that, and aside for the reasons that for me personal, I am a U.S. citizen and a Nicaraguan citizen, but I would leave something like that something that is unique to you, something that defines you and makes you special. If you have something like that, a memento or a trophy or something that you feel is very unique, and I would leave that as a potential talking point. At some point in the interview, you might have the interviewer or one of the interviewers ask about that. For example, if I was interviewing and I happened to leave those two flags in the back, it might raise a question. It might target an idea or produce a conversation where they might ask, I'm curious about your flags. And so why is this important? Well, it's important because, as we said in the previous course, the hardest thing to do in an online interview is to make a connection with the person at the other side of the screen. And sometimes it's these mementos, these symbols, these things that we have that might inspire the interviewer to ask a question and get us talking about something that is obviously important for us and to us, and that will show the interviewer a part of yourself that perhaps would not have come out in the interview. And maybe that will make the difference. Maybe that will be that element that they will really remember and that will separate you from other candidates. So think about the background as you practice and as you do the practice tape sessions. Think about, how does my background look? What do I want to portray with my background? And is there something that really defines me or is really special for me that may make a difference and may serve as an entry point to create that opportunity for making a connection. Some folks like to do quilts, and so maybe a quilt somewhere nicely placed in an office, maybe in an office chair, would be an interesting item to have, or perhaps an important book that you read or are reading. Okay, so something like that might inspire a conversation that allows you to be yourself, to really express yourself, and to make that connection with the interviewer. So that's another strategy that I would recommend. Okay, posture and body language, of course. No slouching. Try to play around with the camera and see which is your better side. Sometimes we have a better side. I don't know which one is my better side. Maybe neither. But I'm sure you have a better side. And so think about that and try and maximize that better side for yourself so that you also feel more comfortable and more empowered when you do your interview. Remember to make sure that the technological glitches are all taken care of. So logistics, the microphone, the volume, the speaker volume, and also I didn't include it in the list, but it's very important, and that is that make sure that all of the potential distractions that might arise, that might come up during the interview, are taken care of. And I have learned this sometimes the hard way. For example, your telephone, try and not have it with you during the interview because it may sound, and we have so many messages coming in, chats or a tweet or an email or a call or a sound from an application, and this can be a little bit distracting. So avoid your cell phone when you do the interview. Also, make sure that the PUP, right, the puppy and the cat are taken care of, right? So make sure that your pets are taken care of, where they will not be crying outside the door wanting to come in because they want something from mommy and daddy, right? So make sure that is taken care of. Of course, let those people in the house, your spouse or your roommate or your kids, let them know that you are starting the interview at whatever time, so that they are also aware and that they also help you and support you in making sure that any distraction that happens, that they can take care of it. Okay? All right. And then a point here I have is what to do with my hands. What do I do with my hands? Okay? And the reason I bring that up is because I am a hand talker, and maybe some of you are hand talkers like me. As you can see, I'm trying my best to keep my hands outside of the screen, but it's not easy for somebody who naturally wants to talk with their hands. And so you want to make sure that if you are a hand talker and you're doing all of this, and moving your hands around, you want to make sure that you keep the hand movement to a minimum, okay? Try and avoid as much as you can the use of your hands. Now, that doesn't mean that you should not use your hands at all, right? You want to use some hand gestures to emphasize an important point. So, for example, if you use the palm, an open palm like this, right? An open palm means that you're emphasizing, it's like something like this, and you see politicians do this a lot, do this, I will bring jobs to our economy, right? So you see that, and that's an open palm. Not only does it emphasize, but it shows honesty. Okay, it's perceived as somebody being honest. Okay, another sign that you might, or another gesture that you might want to use in your interview at that right moment, is the hand on the heart. Okay, the hand on the heart. So the heart is here. So the hand on the heart. The hand on the heart shows two things. It shows that you are genuine. It shows that you are genuine, that you are truthful about something. But it also shows passion, love, right? You're deeply passionate about something, and that is a characteristic. It's a trait that an employer wants to see at some point. And then lastly, here's another trick, or another recommendation, and that is to use steepling. And you'll see this in the videos that we have for this week. There's one video that actually discusses the use of hand gestures and such, use the importance of body language. So steepling, right? So if you do this, right? If you point, that shows that you are confident. It shows that you are firm in your position, in your stance. Okay, so you might want to do this at one point when you really want to emphasize to the interviewer that you are very confident and very committed to one point or one idea. Okay. All right, so these are some tips that you might want to take advantage of as you prepare for your own interview. Remember, in general, when you are practicing and taping yourself to see how you're doing, and looking at lighting, posture, the setting, your dress, you want to think about one question: is what kind of an image am I projecting? What am I saying with my body language? And why is that important to ask? Well, because body language, or nonverbal communication, especially in interviews, is more than half of all communication. It makes up for about half of everything that is said during that interview. So think about that. You're going to say some things that are expected. You're going to answer questions that are being asked and that will determine if you are qualified. But for the most part, what you don't say verbally is what's going to create that image and leave a lasting image and perception about yourself to the interviewer. And you want to leave an image of strength, of integrity, of enthusiasm, of confidence, and of authenticity, right? You don't want to look and come across as rehearsed or not quote unquote real, right? As we sometimes hear in society and in our cultural lingo, right? Be real, right? You know, what does it mean to be real? Well, being real means being you, being that person that God created, and not trying to be somebody else. So, did you do that? Are you portraying that? Is your image portraying that? Is your body language portraying that? Okay, so these are some tips as far as the logistics are concerned. Now, let's talk about the SWOT analysis, okay? And this is a tool that I use in some of my courses, some of my other courses that I teach in leadership, okay? As you know, the SWOT analysis is it's called SWOT analysis because it includes the acronym SWOT, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, and this is a tool that has been used in organizations and in business, in industry, for many years, and it's used to kind of give us a quick state of the organization. It's intended to determine where an organization finds itself, right? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? What are the threats that the environment is creating for that organization? And then what are the opportunities that might arise if we do certain things? Well, if you think about the SWOT analysis and think about it, how it's used for organizations, you can also create a SWOT analysis for yourself, okay? And why is this important? Well, it's important because when you're going to an interview, it's really an opportunity for you to let the employer know, to showcase your strengths. That's what the interview is all about. The fact that you have been chosen for the interview already sets you apart from others that were not selected for an interview. So now it's your chance to really highlight and focus on your strengths so let's look at some of this. Let's look at how the SWOT analysis works in this sense. Okay. Before that, let's think, what is a SWOT analysis? Okay. Why is it useful for me? It's useful because it's going to allow you to be strategic. Okay. And what does this mean, being strategic for an interview? Well, being strategic basically means that you know that you're a great candidate. You know that. But does the interviewer know that? Does the employer know that? Okay? And most often than not, they don't. And so being strategic means that you are going to highlight your God-given strengths. You're going to avoid your weaknesses, right? But it's important to be aware of what they are, right? So that then you can turn those weaknesses and the threats in the environment, the threats that are against you, into opportunities and strengths. This is what being strategic is all about. let's focus on strengths for a minute here. So when we focus on strengths, we ask ourselves, what do I do well? All right. Some of us are very good writers, but unfortunately, you can't write an interview, right? You have to articulate it verbally. And so, if you are a good writer, okay, it's important that you find a way to make sure that the interviewer knows that, especially if the position that you are applying for is a position that requires that skill, or a position where that skill would bring a lot of value. So, as we said in the previous class, do your due diligence, inquire about what the expectations of this position are, what does this position require, and whatever it requires that you do well, you have to emphasize that so that the interviewer can begin to think about you in that position addressing those needs. So what do you do well, and how does that directly align with the position requirements? Think about the hard and soft skills that you have that make you an exceptional candidate. So when we talk about hard skills, these are, for example, knowing finance, or knowing time value of money, or knowing how to manage risk, for example. So understanding certain mathematical relationships, etc. So these are hard skills. But the soft skills are skills that are just as important, especially now, that can make you a really exceptional candidate. And what are these soft skills? Well, it's your outlook. Are you a positive person? Are you a leader? Do you convey leadership characteristics? Okay. Are you charismatic? Are you a team player? Okay. Do you have perseverance? Are you strategic? Okay. By strategic means, are you able to manage risk, manage uncertainty, solve decisions using the information that is at your disposal? Okay. So these are some of those characteristics, right? And then, of course, how does my education align with my career goals and this position? So you're going to be finishing your education at California Baptist. So ask yourself, now that I have this degree, how does this degree align with what I want to be, or what role I want to fulfill, or this position that I'm applying for? How does it align? What did I learn at Cal Baptist that makes me an ideal candidate for this position? These are the internal factors that you control. On the other side, you have the weaknesses, right? And these are the things that you have difficulty doing. So you might have some deficiencies, and some of us have, for example, technological deficiencies. We're not as good as some others would be in running applications, or dealing with the really high tech programs that computers have these days and such. And so we might have these deficiencies. Then there are other factors, right? For example, image factors. There might be a gap in your resume that has created a weakness in your profile, in your candidacy. And so you understand that, but you're also prepared to address it. So just like a skill deficiency in technology, for example, you acknowledge that you have that, but you're also prepared to address it. Same thing with image factors, a gap in a resume, for example. You also might have a weakness like a personal limitation, like social and sensory issues. Okay, so you might have that kind of a weakness where you might be an introvert. All right. And that is not a weakness that cannot be turned into a strength, or at least managed. We just need to understand that we are, and then find ways to turn our introversion into not necessarily become extroverts, but learn how to be extroverted when the situation demands it. And of course, emotional intelligence. This is a weakness that many of us have, and it's a hard one to really master, because we get emotional. Things sometimes upset us. We sometimes are faced with situations and run into people that cause us some grief, and so it's hard to maintain that emotional intelligence. But the first step in improving that is by acknowledging that we have that weakness, and then beginning to find tools and strategies to help us manage those imbalances, those emotional imbalances that we might have sometimes. Again, these are factors that we control. The factors that we don't control are the other side of the SWOT analysis, and these are the opportunities and the threats. So an opportunity for this job interview, for this position, might be, for example, the question about why you want this position or job. Okay, this is an opportunity. This opens up an opportunity for you to think about whether this job and this opportunity is really aligning with what you want to do in life and the path that God has set for you. Is this what God wants me to do? Is this position where God wants me to be? Okay? So by approaching the interview and the job search and hiring process in this way, it gives you an opportunity to really think about what you're doing and whether what you're doing is what you think God has intended for you to do. So in this sense, asking the question, why is this job right for me? Right? Sometimes we let ourselves become blinded by a quest for a position. We want the position so much we forget or we overlook that the position perhaps is not the right one for us. So ask yourself, why is this job right for me? And be critical when you ask that question, because you might find some answers to your question that will make you think, perhaps rethink and reevaluate your goals and your decisions, right? And then, of course, how will this job add value to my life and allow me to fulfill God's true purpose for me? In the end, it's all about fulfilling your purpose. And if this job will not give you that opportunity, if it doesn't support that objective, then again, something to think about, right? These are external factors that you don't control. Last one in the SWOT analysis is the threats, right? And as we said in previous lecture, think about what are you giving up by taking this job or by taking this new position, okay? That's a threat. It's a threat, personal threat. It's a threat or potential threat to your family. It's a personal threat or potential threat to your livelihood, and also to your relationship with God, okay? So what are you giving up, and what are you willing to give up with this position? And you may find this is not necessarily a bad question to ask. It's a threat. It is a threat, but if you think about this question and you end up with nothing, then that in and of itself is a good sign that perhaps this is the right job for you. If you don't think that there is anything that you are giving up that would push you away from God's path for you, then perhaps you are on that path. And so it's an important question to ask. You might also be threatened by the idea of how you stack up against other candidates. And so how do you address this threat? Because this is something that you can't control, right? You can't control the quality of other candidates. You can't control how many people are going to be interviewed for this position. But you can control you. You can control those things that make you different, that separate you from the pack, from the rest. And so by thinking about this threat, it allows you the opportunity to align this threat with your strengths to see, how do I turn this threat into a victory for me by emphasizing my strengths, which, when I do so, will place me above and beyond the competition. And then lastly, you might ask yourself, will I be able to meet expectations? And this is a threat that is a personal threat. It's a natural reaction, right? It has to do with us being concerned about the uncertainty of the position. It might have to do with us being apprehensive. What if I fail? What if I don't live up to the expectations that they have for me and that I have set out for myself? You don't want to fail anybody. You don't want to fail the company. You don't want to fail your family, and you don't want to fail yourself. Okay? This is a factor that you can't control. But there is a solution. There is a remedy for this. And that is placing your trust in God. Okay? I have this line that I like to use in my classes, and it says that you can't control what you can't control, right? It's simple. You can't control what you can't control, so don't try and control it. Let God take care of it. Trust God in helping you control those things, okay? All you can do in the end when you come to that interview is communicate those strengths, right? Communicate those strengths to the interviewer. Convey self-confidence. This will maximize your opportunities, okay? And face threats with courage and conviction. That's all you can do. Everything else, you leave it to the Lord and let the chips fall where they may. It's that simple. In the end, it's just an interview. It's just an opportunity. Chances are it won't be the first or the last. And so we have to really think about an interview as just an opportunity to showcase how good we are, and if it's meant to be, and if it's in the path that God has set out for us, then things are going to take care of themselves and things are going to happen. If it's not, then it wasn't meant to be. And that would be my recommendation of how to approach the interview in general. Okay? All right. So I hope you enjoyed this week's presentation. I hope that you found it insightful and helpful. And as always, please let me know if you have any questions about the content of the presentation, as well as questions on this week's material and the assignment. And you can reach out to me to my email. And of course, I'll be very happy to respond and provide you with support. And don't forget, if you have not done so, to please get in touch with Laura Acosta to set up your mock interview. And as always, I wish you the best. Have a great week, and God bless you. Thank you very much.